Hello, lovelies, and welcome to this month's edition of Sisters in Mental Illness. If you don't already know me, I'm Shaylee Hugendorn. I have bipolar 2 disorder, and I started this vlog so that I could talk to other women and share their mental health journeys. And so if you wanted to hear a bit more about my story, we'll have it all down below, but I'm really excited today because I have someone that I've been following online for quite a while now, and I'm just so, just so impressed with her vulnerability and honesty, and it's been just really inspiring and comforting to me, just watching someone else bring hard things into the light and talking about them. And so this is Grace Sandra, and she is, I'm just going to read a few things off of the website. So she is a writer, an author, I'm going to talk about her book later, and a former blogger. She says she's a recovering addict of sorts, long story, a Jesus follower, a woman hell-bent on recovery, a lover of Black womanhood and SJW, quoted ironically, of course, an advocate for the oppressed through and through. Little cute, little silly, which I love, and a little obsessed with self-development. She's, and then it says a little fashion forward, which she totally is if you see her Instagram, but also tired. I hear you. Yeah. So welcome. Thank you so much for being willing to come on and talk to me. I would just love to start with hearing about your journey. When did you know that there was, something wrong or that you needed help?
So just in general, you mean with like depression and things like that?
Yeah, sure. Wherever you want to start with your journey, we would love to hear.
Yeah. So I think I first realized that I was really struggling with depression in high school. I probably may have been before, but it became very pronounced in high school. And there were a lot of situational things happening. So it's hard to say whether or not I would have struggled with depression the way I have if things weren't, but I guess there's no way to know. But yes, I realized probably about 16. And then from there, it kind of morphed. What I usually say is that I have struggled with some form of clinical depression. I've had postpartum depression. I've had really bad PMDD, which for those who don't know is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is like kind of like PMS but on crack.
Wow.
Like really bad depression, like 7 to 10 days before your cycle. And then I've struggled with seasonal depression. And then most recently I've back in 20, sorry, I should have thought about my timeline.
No worries.
I think it was 2017 or 2018 when I was diagnosed with acute stress disorder and CPTSD, and had various struggles around a situation we may or may not talk about. But so it's always been one form I feel like that I've been battling. And I think I wrote this in the book. I don't remember, you can tell me, that I had, I don't remember if I read it in a book or like a Facebook status update. But whenever I try to shed awareness on these issues, I wrote or have written that I've been some form of like suicidal at least once a year for like 20 or 30 years. Because of one of these various forms. So I would definitely say it's been a chronic battle. But then I'm also someone who has, I think because I'm a 7, and I know I'm in good company, I've had, like really high highs too. So some people are surprised. They're like, oh wait, what? You struggle with depression? I'm like, oh yeah, when it's bad, it's bad, But someone may have met me and I've gone 5 months being totally fine. You know what I mean? Well, not totally, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been an interesting.
So talk me through what I was fascinated about. And when I first found you online, where you talked about kind of like the then and now. So what you used to do, like blogging, and then what you do now. And I know you talked about like it was kind of blown up or burned down, and then to what you're kind of doing now. Could you talk me through like, what was it like? What were you doing when you were blogging? What were you blogging about?
Oh, sure. So when I got started blogging, it was more kind of mommy blogging.
Yeah.
That was the thing of the time. And I had just had a baby, my first baby. So I was really excited to mommy blog. And I was honestly blogging about fashion and really kind of superfluous things. Not that I don't want to belittle anyone who fashion blogs or anything like that, but I knew that there was deeper stuff rumbling in me, and I was afraid to write about it. After Ferguson happened, I decided to start being more forthcoming with writing about issues that have to do with race and my experience growing up as a multiracial woman who identifies as Black in America. And that's when I started writing about, so I was very severely abused with my dad as a kid. I started writing about my abuse, and that led to writing about mental health things, that led to writing about depression. So kind of like all just evolved over the years. I feel like my writing got more and more serious. It started off so lighthearted and like, do you guys like these shoes? And I went from that to, once I got introduced to kind of the wider faith blogging community, and She Loves and you know, Sarah Bessey and A Deeper Story and all of that, then I started tackling more serious issues. But I think what happened for me, unfortunately, with blogging is that I think in about the 10th year of doing that, I got really, really, really burned out. Like super burned out, where I was like, I just can't do this anymore. And I'm not getting the returns that other people are getting just because I've never been good at the business side of it.
Yeah.
I just didn't know how to turn it into a job. Basically, it's like I got so burned out. I was like, you know, occasionally making $100 a month. And I was like, great, now I can pay for my URL. Maybe, you know? So yeah, so that's what happened. I kind of burned out. And then at some point in there is when I kind of had my, like, I hate to call it a midlife crisis because that just, I feel like kind of minimizes, but basically my life kind of blew up. I got a divorce amongst a lot of other drama. And I really felt like I needed to stop writing for a while and just focus on trying to get my life together. Yeah. So I stopped for a while. But well, I should say I stopped writing publicly. Okay. But one of the things that's helped me with my depression battles all along is writing personally. So I never stopped journaling. I never stopped writing out prayers. I never stopped writing notes to myself and affirmations. I never stopped that stuff. I just wasn't sharing it. So writing has really, really always been very personal to me. I think that's why people often tell me that they appreciate the vulnerability of my writing because it comes from the vulnerability of writing to me and for me and writing out prayers. So yeah, so then when I decided to start writing again and was really like, this is who I am, this is what I need to do. I just decided it doesn't have to be a blog. Literally no one is holding a gun to your head telling you it has to be a blog. You could just make books, or you could write, you know, Facebook updates, or just write for Medium once in a while. So I just decided I'm done with that world. I don't have the energy for it, for blogging at least.
Yeah, well, and it's changed so much now, right? Yeah. It was like the height of it, and now it seems like there's more on Instagram and such.
Yeah.
So how long of a break did you take?
I would say it was probably about 3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years, yeah. So when you came back, whereabouts were you in your mental health journey when you came back and started writing again?
Not in a great place, honestly. So yeah, not in a great place. I was really like, I need to survive. And I think probably the only way out of this is to share my story with other people. Wow. So that's really when I started, and even last year, it was about last year this time I started working on a different book, not the one that you actually have read, a different one, because I felt like I want people to know what I've done these last few years to survive. And it was too much. It was too much. It was one of those things where it was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. So then I started compiling the book that I just put out recently, which is Grace Actually. I started compiling things that I have written in the last decade that people really loved and responded to. In addition to probably 25 to 30% of that book was new stuff that had never been published anywhere else.
Wow.
So I just decided I want to put something out. I had probably 8 years ago told everyone, you know, on social media, I'm doing a memoir. I'm writing this memoir of my life growing up in Detroit called Detroit's Daughter, blah, blah, blah. I got everyone excited about it. I was shopping for agents. I was writing a proposal. I was doing all these things. And then when my life blew up, I just stopped all of it. So I felt like I've been promising people a book for 8 or 9 years, maybe even 10. I need to put something out. So that's how Grace actually was kind of born, was just like, I need to put something out and I need to do it quickly because I've been promising people something for way too long.
Oh, wow.
And also I just felt like I wanted to do something that shows like I'm still here. I still have a voice. I'm still writing. I still have something to say. I still have lots to share. I have 4 books mostly done, honestly, that I just kind of need to get together and get going and actually get back to contacting agents and writing proposals and doing all of that. But I still have that memoir. It was actually literally basically done. But life was just too overwhelming and I couldn't get to it. So I think I'm on the road. I know I'm on the road back to my writerly roots.
Yeah.
And sharing about mental health has become so much more important to me now.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that was probably why I was allowed to go through all the things I went through, because I'm really very passionate now about talking more about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Because as soon as I started opening up, it just was like, me too. And I was like, wow, and I try not to get hurt by it, but I get a lot of, well, I would have never thought. And I'm like, well, we look like everybody else.
So anyway, all that to say, like, I understand the shame around all of it in a certain way because of that. And that's, I think, in part why I try to be real honest now too, because I'm like, you know what, some of this stuff is just not our fault.
No, not at all, right? Like sometimes instead of saying I'm anxious, I'll be like, my cortisol levels are high, just to bring it down to people. It sounds ridiculous, but just to show that it's medical, right? Just to use different terminology to be like, hey, like I didn't just, I'm not just worried about, this happening. There's something going on in my brain. And even though, I know these thoughts aren't true, I'm still having them, right?
Yeah. I literally said that to somebody the other day. I said, because I was talking about trauma bonding, which you asked me about earlier.
Yeah.
I said, I didn't realize that I was doing this, but I said, you do know that a lot of it's chemical, right? Like there's a literal physical chemical addiction in my body that is producing these actions and this mindset. And it's an addiction akin to like being addicted to heroin.
Wow.
And so I said this to the person and he was just looking at me and I'm like, it's not just like, I'm not making this up, because I think sometimes people who don't understand it at all, they really think you're trying to make something up as an excuse for poor behavior.
Yeah.
It's like, no, there is something stronger than me happening,
Yeah.
And I've tried to explain it to people too with panic attacks and triggers, because unfortunately that word triggered has been robbed by the culture as funny. But it's so sad because like this is all happening for me, like while I've actually been experiencing very, very real triggers. I am actually literally being triggered, and it's happening in a way for me where I can't control it. So for example, I work my full-time work, I work at a library, and part of what I do is at the front desk. I work in a downtown area where there are almost all of my city's homeless shelters are down there. So we have a very, very large population of unhoused, mentally ill people who come in. Sometimes some of the men come in and they're pretty scary to me as a woman who's been abused by several men, number one. But two, because of their mental illness, they're very erratic and loud. And frankly, as a woman, I'm just usually scared of men anyway, okay?
So, fair enough.
It doesn't matter what they look like, but when you add the component of mental illness, possibly because of my own experience with my mom, I am pretty triggered. But what happens to me, what I've realized is pretty wild this year, is that it's happening in my body outside of my control. So like when I start to get scared at some of the patrons who are scaring me, like my heart starts beating, the adrenaline is coursing through my blood. I can feel my hands getting really sweaty. I can feel the anxiety bubbling up, and I can literally be telling myself like, it's okay, you're safe, there's a security guard, and my body's still doing all the stuff. And it's been really a really weird, never happened to me like this before. This is the first year I've ever had panic attacks like that, where I can say like mentally like, hey, you're okay, calm down, and my body is just like, no, I won't calm down. Like, I'm triggered. So that's been like wild. So I think sometimes when I'm trying to tell people what's happening in me, I'm like, listen, this is not something I can control. Like, I'm having legitimate panic attacks that are happening in my body. Yeah. And I have to literally sit down and take deep breaths for like 20 minutes just to get my body to calm down, even if my mind is telling me I'm okay and I'm safe. So the Moran, I mean, that's probably more an element of complex PTSD, but yeah, I think, well, they're kind of all related, but yeah, it's a chemical thing. It's not just.
Totally. Yeah. What is I don't quite know, like I know PTSD, what is the complex part? Like what is the difference between those two diagnoses?
Sure. Yeah. So PTSD usually is more in a single event related thing.
Okay.
So like, let's say if someone is raped, that would be considered PTSD. Complex PTSD happens as a result of multiple traumas, or a sustained, like being in a sustained situation, like someone who went off to war,
right?
And they've maybe seen like 6 of their best friends die, and all sorts of, they're going to come back with complex PTSD because they were living for so long under toxic stress. So for me, I mean, I think I've shared this. I don't know how much I came out in the book with this. I don't really remember now.
You talked a lot of, you talked about your past, yeah, for sure, or childhood things as well.
Oh, okay. So for me, more recently, like I went probably 3.5 years under sustained toxic stress from an abuse scenario. And so multiple trauma after multiple trauma after multiple trauma for 3 years in a row. That's what gave me the acute stress disorder. And then complex PTSD is because of the interwovenness of sustained toxic stress and intermittent times of peace and through cycles of. So so it just produces a little bit of a different effect. I mean, they're very similar, obviously, but the ways that it shows can be really different.
Wow. Yeah. And the long term, it's like, how do you start healing if it's still happening? Yeah. The other thing that you talked about, so what does that look like? So the complex PTSD, what does that, like, how does that manifest? What does that look like for you personally?
Yeah, well, some of the things I mentioned, so it's having panic attacks, number one. I started having panic attacks earlier this year. I think in January, February, where I literally couldn't breathe. And there was a few times where like my heart started hurting and I felt like I was having a heart attack.
Yes.
I didn't actually recognize that it was a panic attack just because all the years that I was dealing with abuse, I never had that happen. So I really thought I was having a heart attack. So I started Googling, Yeah, and then I saw that was very common for women, especially for women of my age group, especially, and also for people with PTSD, because your symptoms are masking a heart attack, but it's usually anxiety. And if you go to the hospital, usually they'll be like, and it says if these things are happening, definitely go to the hospital. But it was pretty obvious to me because of the way my breathing was labored that I was actually having panic attacks. So I started having panic attacks whenever abuse was happening, which is pretty typical. And then, one of the biggest way that it's shown for me in the past couple of years has been insomnia, nightmares, inability to calm myself down. I've had to learn a lot of tools and tricks to do that. A lot of anxiety, fear of things I was never afraid of before, just going out, like just literally going outside.
Wow.
So I think it's dramatically increased my fear of men in general. And then obviously I think the biggest way is all the things that are included with pretty standard depression, which is like feeling like I can't take care of myself, fear of being unable to focus, obsessive behaviors, developing obsessive behaviors. Yeah, a lot of stuff.
I hear you with the anxiety attacks. It's so frustrating because, or even the obsessive thoughts that I would get. I know there's like this logical part of me that's like, that is not true. You don't need to think that, or you're safe or whatever. But it's so frustrating to physically not be able to, right? And it's just like, sometimes I've told my husband before, I've been like, sometimes I just wish I didn't know. And then I could just be all kinds of crazy and then I wouldn't know. But it's so frustrating to know that, that you're okay, but your whole body and brain is acting like you're not. I just find that really overwhelming. And that's how I know that it's a chemical thing, right? Like,
yeah, it's really hard too when people don't understand why you're scared or take offense to why you're scared, and it's like this is happening. I mean, I think having nightmares has really clarified that for me, because I wake up with symptoms. I literally wake up with my heart racing. I can feel that adrenaline is like coursing through my blood. I'm sweaty.
Yeah.
I'm worried, I'm sad, and I wake up and I know, well, okay, of course it's not real, but look at what my body has done.
Yeah.
It literally respond as if it's not real. So that has honestly helped me, like when I'm in a real life situation, I'm like, look,
yeah,
honor this fear that you're feeling, just acknowledge that it's there, that you're really feeling this, and do what you can to calm yourself down. So
when you have, I've never had a lot of this, but when you have your nightmares, do you remember them, or are they about specific things?
Yes, I do.
Oh,
Terrible. And I've always had, like, so for example, like last week I had a nightmare that I was raped, and every time I tried to tell someone, I would get attacked again.
oh,
So I have really, really insanely evil dreams.
oh, friend.
It's been an issue for me for like 15 years. And there's been times where it's been worse, but this last month has been really bad. I probably had two a week at least, where they're super intense and graphic and detailed, and
Oh.
particularly like my particular poison of what would hurt me the most, of someone to say or something to happen,
Yeah,
or something, and that's what it is. It feels like it's like satanic almost.
oh, wow, that's horrible.
So yeah, although I haven't had those outside of this last month and a half or so, I haven't had them for a while. So I'm thinking it's just due to the stress and pressure right now of like life situationally, and I'm hoping that once life kind of calms a little bit in a few areas, that at least those will go away. But that is a really, really, really hard thing to deal with, especially with how my body is responding to stress right now.
Right, because like, what medication would you take for that?
No, there's nothing. I mean, I'm already on an antidepressant, but there is nothing, that you can calm your dreams. So I think part of it is because of the antidepressant. I'm wondering, because typically antidepressants can give you a little bit of sleeplessness, so you're not going into as deep sleep.
Yeah.
More vivid dreams.
Wow.
So, but it's worth it for me to stay on it.
Yeah.
Even if you have the dreams, it's still worth it for me to stay on it. So
yeah, that's like some of my side effects. The one, like, just the morning, right? Like, it's just so painful to get up and to get started. Once I'm there, I'm fine, but it's just physically just overwhelming in the morning. And like when my kids are sick and stuff, I have to get, even though he has to work in the morning, I have to get my husband, because I feel like I've been like, it's just awful, but it's way more worse, like the depression and the thoughts and that. It's like a trade-off, right? Yeah, I hear you with that. So I noticed a lot on your Instagram lately talking about trauma bonding. I never heard of that before. Can you walk us through what it is and how you're experiencing it, or maybe like why, or how that works?
Sure. Yeah, so trauma bonding is a response that people have in relationship to abuse, to their abuser. And usually, so there's another name for it too, Stockholm syndrome, which you may be more familiar with.
Okay, yeah.
It's kind of similar to Stockholm syndrome, but it's a little bit different, because Stockholm syndrome can happen. So like okay, so Stockholm syndrome was named for like I guess like a bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden.
Okay.
No, I realized that like a year and a half ago or something when I was researching it. But basically, these people bonded to the people who robbed the bank in like 3 or 4 days. And if you actually look up Stockholm syndrome, there's some really fascinating like high profile cases of how this came about. But all of those are like really short periods of time where a victim bonded with their abuser. Trauma bonding is more of like a long-term sustained when you're in a partnership with someone who's
Okay.
abusive to you, or it's your parents. So if your parents are very abusive, trauma bonding happens. And the severity of your trauma bonding is related to the severity of the abuse. So I was in an abusive marriage, and that I understood honestly like January of 2017. I think, yeah. One of my friends said, like, it really seems like you have Stockholm syndrome. And I was like, what? Like, I remember being like, there's no way. I just didn't understand it at all. But I knew at that point that I was being abused, but I also knew like there is no way possible I can leave.
Wow.
I just had this strong feeling like I love him with everything in me. I will never leave him. I don't care what anyone says. And then when she said that, I was like, that's just loyalty, you know? And then I started reading more about it. And then I was like, oh, maybe I do have Stockholm syndrome. So that was like the first step, was me coming to grips with it. I had never heard of trauma bonding at that point. I don't think so. Yeah. I'll just say this. I recognize that I kind of, had developed some Stockholm syndrome, and I set out to get more awareness of what was going on, because I didn't even really fully realize all the ways that I was being used. So I did a lot of research. So then when I realized and started doing more research about trauma bonding was when I actually started to try to let go. Even before we decided to be separated, even before I decided to leave, all of that stuff, I decided to try to emotionally let go, and I couldn't. I literally couldn't. I would actually say to myself, you are going to let go. You are going to pull back. You are going to emotionally remove yourself. You know, you are going to protect yourself. And I couldn't.
Wow.
And I also couldn't explain why I couldn't.
Right.
I just couldn't. It felt like death. It literally felt like, nope, I can't. I just can't. So it took a lot for me to even to pursue leaving. And I have so much grace now for women who go through this, because I've never experienced anything like the strength of wanting to stay and keep being abused, and the confusion of that. Yeah. So anyway, but then once I realized it was really bad was actually once I finally was able to get us separated and get us living separately, and my trauma bonding just went into like hyperdrive. Like I can't even articulate it clearly enough. I've never experienced anything more potent or controlling or strong than me trying to literally get him back after I worked so hard, like for 6 or 7 or 8 months, to try to get us separate. And so, yeah, and just trying to pursue him in every way. And
even though you knew it would hurt you, it just felt so strong.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I started really, really in earnest reading about trauma bonding, and then I joined some groups on Facebook for people who have been in intimate partner relationships where there's an abuse dynamic and who struggled through trauma bonding. And literally everything they were saying was things I was doing, things I'm saying, the stuff that the abusive partner was saying is things he was saying. It was just all like, oh, like this, we are like literally textbook.
Wow.
Shuffling through this horribly toxic, dysfunctional mess. So, and then I started realizing, then I started reading about the physical aspects. So, the best example that I've given a few people to understand it is kind of like, you know, this experiment of a rat where they go over and they hit the button and they get a pellet.
Yeah.
Then they start giving to them every third, you know, then they start giving to them randomly, and then they start shocking them when they hit the thing. And the more scarcely that they give the pellet, so if they go from 1 in 50 shocks to 1 in 100, the more the mouse will, or the rat or whatever, will press the button and get the shock.
Oh, wow.
uncertain when they're going to get the pellet. So it actually creates more mania and hysteria in them when they don't know when they're going to get it. And I realized that for us, so for me, trauma bonding was looking like that. It was like we were shuffling through the cycles of abuse so quickly towards the end, like whereas before it was like every 3 months we'd go through a full cycle.
Yeah.
We were going like every week through a full cycle, or every 3 days through a full cycle. And I just didn't know when we were going to get to the honeymoon stage of the abuse cycle again, which is where I got to feel like, oh, now he loves me, now everything's okay now.
Yeah.
And I was trying so hard to get that, but it was becoming more intermittent. So it was producing more and more of basically what happens is your body becomes literally physically addicted to abuse.
Wow.
So that's what was happening. And I was literally chasing him down. Like, you know, if you could say it in such certain terms, it'd be like, hey, I'm here. I'm ready for my abuse now, just so we can get back to the good feeling I get afterwards when it seems like you love me. So it's a lot to work through. It's really been a really insane, just an insane process. I literally can't believe what I've subjected myself to. At the same time, when I read about so many other women who've gone through this, I feel very normal, because I'm like, and some women have gone to such extremes, you know, and we all know the stories of women go back to their abusers 7 times.
Oh, yeah.
Because of this very chemical addiction in your body. So yes, I've been working really hard to release myself from the trauma bonds, and I can't even say I'm out of it.
Right.
It's actually still too fresh, but I am working very, very, very diligently to try to do it. And
that's really powerful for people to understand, because, you know, as we know, there's, you know, judgment, and we see it with strong women too, going back, right? We don't see this, we see it as a choice, right? But what you're saying is that, you know, it's not a choice for you. It was like a physical thing or an addiction. Wow, that's powerful for people to understand.
Yeah, and I realized at some point, I mean, through a lot of reading, I've been reading a lot of books and listening to a lot of podcasts and watching a lot of YouTube videos and trying to just get up information, because that's how I've gotten out of this, honestly, is by seeking education, you know?
Yeah.
But I've realized it is my choice to make, but what I've realized I've had to do is I have to make little choices every day.
Right.
Add up to me being in a better place to resist the temptation to give into it. So that's what's helped me is I have to make little mindset choices every day. And there's some steps I'm going through. There's some exercises I'm going through. I could go into a lot more depth about it, but there's some things I'm doing to address. Basically, if I can say this briefly, you have to address the trauma that happened in your childhood that would even want you to keep being traumatized in your adulthood.
Right.
What I'm doing now is I'm going through exercises to help me address the trauma of my brother and father who first abused me, my first abusers. If I can address that, then that can help me deal with the little girl in me that's trying to run my life and be abused again. Because I mean, you know, regardless of him, I don't want to be. I am statistically vulnerable to being in another abusive relationship just because of what I've just been through. Right. So regardless of him and trauma bonding, I have to protect myself so that moving forward, I don't keep attracting abuse. I'm a high empath, which is very, very, very vulnerable to narcissists in general. So,
wow.
So yeah, I'm trying to really work hard to address that inner trauma, that like inner little girl, and that's made some difference, but it's really painful work.
Yeah, I find it fascinating what you said about making the little choices. Often we think it's just same with like any other addiction, right? You just, it's over, right? Like you just make the choice and it's over. Those things just don't go away. I mean, I don't have a giant trauma, but I have unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? Even just little ones so that I don't feel my feelings, or so that I don't and I find I fall back into them. As much as I'm very fortunate that they found once I went to the hospital and then got the right medication, that it's really helped, right? I was really lucky. I've never gone back to that you know, I've had ups and downs, of course, but that deep, deep depression. But I find myself, even if I start getting a little sad, because when I would be in my depression, I'd get like a severe obsessive disordered eating. But when I wasn't in a depression, it's no big deal. I didn't even care. I didn't even remember what I ate. But when I was depressed, it was like restriction and binge. And I find even like if I start to feel a little sadness, like I start going towards the food. And do you know what I mean? Like I try to find things to numb myself. Or when I have like an anxiety attack, instead of thinking through what to do, I just want to do the first thing that makes me feel better, right? No matter what it is. And it's a bunch of little choices and over, because a part of me is like, I keep having to remind myself, like healing is not linear, right? Because it's like, I almost feel like I need to arrive. Do you know what I mean? Like I need to, you know, it's been this many years. Surely I can make the right choices. And I find myself sometimes like it's not linear.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that. So actually somebody just said that to me the other day and I forget that every single day.
It's hard, right? It's like, it's almost like we stigmatize ourselves. So like, why aren't you better? You know better than this in my head, right? And I'm like, okay, you give so much grace to other, like, would you talk to your friend like this? Hell no, you would have no friends.
Yeah.
Right?
Actually, radical self-love, like radical self-kindness, radical self-compassion is really one of the key ways to heal yourself from trauma.
Wow. Yes.
Literally everything I read says that, every single thing. You have to literally release yourself, especially trauma that, you know, that's so situational. You know what I mean? Like if somebody's walking down the street and a brick falls on your foot and you have to lose your foot, like literally, you know, this was not your fault, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I've been really trying to do that, and I don't speak badly to myself at all anymore under any circumstances.
Good for you. I am trying. And I'll have like really, really great days. And then I'll have like some days where I've just said something and I know the other person didn't even notice. They probably didn't even give it a second thought. And I'm just like, and I don't have this ability to think before I speak. So that's not very helpful because I usually say exactly what I'm thinking all the time. And sometimes I'll get home and there are a few circumstances that still come up from years ago. I'm like, P.S. that person doesn't even remember you. Like what's going on? And I just feel humiliated about it. And I know it's not a big deal. I know one of my things, and I think it fed into the whole belonging and being chosen. And I know you wrote something about it. I was looking on your website or somewhere, and you talked about it doesn't matter if other people choose you, you're going to choose yourself. And I was like, yes, right? Because I have a thing with belonging. I'm always like, even though I'm very outgoing and I have usually have a beautiful group of friends. I mean, I attribute a lot of my continuing healing journey to community. Like I feel like if I didn't have community, one, I don't know if I'd be here. And two, I don't know if I would be on any kind of healing journey, right? Like loneliness and belonging are like the two biggest things. And I think for mine, it goes back to I was engaged once, very young, but I was engaged once and he left. And still even though it was the best thing that ever happened, it really was. But to this day, still the fact that I was chosen and then unchosen, probably he doesn't even think of me anymore. Right. And it's not that I wanted him. It's that I wanted to be how can you unchoose me? Like, what is wrong with me that I was unchosen? It's just, yeah.
Get you. Yeah, you feel completely discarded.
Right?
Yeah, I get that. Yes, that's why I'm trying to choose myself nowadays.
Yeah, I know. I was so inspired by that and you, like you said, little choices, like we have to keep choosing every day, right?
Keep visualizing the outcomes, like things that I've heard. You hear these things along the way and you're like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
You really, really need them in that scenario. Like I literally have to do that now. I have to replay, like visualize the scenario so that I don't fall into trauma bonding behaviors. Like for example, I'll give you a concrete example. When we are doing custodial time switches, I have to literally tell myself, visualize the interaction so that I maintain appropriate boundaries and like don't try to hug him. Like that's how messed up, you know, like somebody might be like, try to hug him, like why, you know, people who don't understand this at all is like, why would you want to hug him, you know? And I'm like, you don't get it. You literally don't get what's physically happening to me where it feels like that hug. And actually, in truth, the hug actually does produce that. It actually literally does calm my body down because that's what we're created to do, you know, like human touch actually does calm your body down. But in this scenario, it's worse for me. So I visualize it so that I'm not even tempted to want to do that anymore.
Right.
Um, but that's like a little choice, you know, seems like a little choice, but it adds up over time.
Right. Right.
So, and
Wow.
one day I think I'll be free of that, but I'm still struggling with various aspects.
Yeah. And I just think you're so brave to share in it. I mean, I think it's like human nature, or I don't know if it's ego or what, to be able to, there's so many people talking about it once they've been through something or when it's over, and especially I find in faith communities. And I just, I'm in awe of people like you, and I try to be the same thing, is talk when you're in it, right? Because every time I'd hear someone's perfect bow story, and I know there's stories out there and that's wonderful, but I would sit either in church or in a women's group or something like that, and it would make me feel 50 times worse. Like, what is the matter with you that you can't heal and she can? Or she read 20 Bible verses and now she's all better, and you read the Bible verses and you want to chuck your Bible. Like, what is the matter with you? Right? So it's
no, I totally get that. And I really wish I could have said more. I wanted to say more over these past few years, but I was just afraid to, for obvious reasons. But I would have said more. I felt like I dropped a lot of hints. I felt like I had to, you know, run around behind, you know, closed doors asking for help because I felt like I did need help. I did need support. And there were times I was totally overwhelmed. And I literally would have said more, but it was just the nature of the situation. So in the past few months, I've just decided to be a little bit more unafraid and share more and just trust God.
Yeah. That kind of leads me to like, how have you experienced this? I don't know if you go to an actual church or where you're at with that, but how have you experienced sharing about these things, or being, you know, this vulnerable, in faith communities and in church, and what has been kind of reactions you have experienced?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag because I was sharing some of the stuff that I was going through with one of the women in my church who's one of the leaders. She's on the leadership team, and I I felt like she wasn't taking it as seriously as she should have for what I was sharing, um, and that was kind of disappointing. Um, Although I don't know quite what her response should have been.
Right.
I just can say only that I felt disappointed. I wish she had checked in on me because I think it's very, I don't know, but I feel like it's pretty rare for someone to come to church and say, "Hey, I'm being abused. Can you help me?" So the fact that I was that vulnerable,
Yeah.
I just felt like there should have been more happening. And then there was a few things that happened. Like one time I was in church and he had literally had this like horribly explosive anger, verbally abusive, ugly moment, like while we were in church. And so I started hysterically crying. I was sitting in the pew hysterically crying, and she came and got me and she said, "What's going on?" And I said, "I was literally just like verbally abused in the hallway and I'm hysterical. I feel like I can't calm myself down, like we talked about earlier." And there was no follow-up. And then there was a time where I confessed to the pastor's son's wife. Yeah. About some stuff that was going on. And she said something really mean. She said something like, "So are you done being angry all the time?" I was just like, what?
Wow.
Like, if you understood what I was going through, you would be angry for me, and you would know that this is the anger I've shown, what she was talking about just on Facebook, is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what I'm actually going through. So I think I just kind of decided at some point, like, it's not really safe to share at church what's going on, and I don't think I'm going to be taken seriously. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, I understand it. I really, really do understand people not understanding this. But I also feel like there should have been more follow-up, because I told not a lot of people at church, probably 4.
Yeah.
And in addition to, all of the ways that I was kind of trying to send signals through social media that I felt like I was in trouble, that I felt like I was suicidal. There were times I felt like I was in danger. And I was just, throwing out subtle things. And you know what some people have told me why they didn't respond to that is because they were like, well, in all your other posts, you present as so pretty and put together and funny and thoughtful and intelligent. And I'm like, really?
You can be both, right? You can.
Actually, one of my friends told me all that has worked against me. She was like, yeah, you just present as really happy and put together.
Yeah.
Like, people are genuinely distracted by, like, oh, look, she's got cute hair. She's so pretty. She's so smart, or whatever. And I was just like, that's really messed up, because I mean, people put the most ominous stuff on Facebook.
Yeah, but they got dressed, so they're fine, right? Or my
IG stories and stuff, like, I've tried to at point to be really honest and ask for help, when I felt like I really needed it. And I think I literally would have had to post a picture of me with a black eye for someone to say, like, do you really need help?
Right? Or like I have to be in the hospital, especially like, I hate the word high functioning because it sounds like you're better, but it's not. It's just that you're, the way your chemicals are working. But because I never, even when I was depressed, I would still go do the things. I just didn't feel anything. And I didn't actually want to be there, but I would still do the things because I don't have the social anxiety part. But it's almost better for me to be with people because I was afraid to be alone with my feelings. Right? So if I was with people, I could just be doing what they were doing or thinking of other things. I didn't have to be. It took me a very long time to just want to be alone with my thoughts because they scared me. So, but I found that, that was the biggest reaction. And I get it. They were well-meaning people around me, but like, it was the most hurtful thing to be like, well, not you, you have it all together. And I'm like, great. Now you just think of me, as this, or like, how much stigma is that? Like, how much stigma is there around that you have to actually be like at the lowest of the low, right? We should be looking for signs. I think especially in the church, like, why can't we be messy in the church? It should be the messiest of places, and that should be okay. They're just like,
yeah, and people really don't know. I'm like, it sucks. Today sucks.
Right?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I wish the church did have more of because also it would take the stigma off of people who are not just the victim of something, but people who are actually involved in.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I think it should be mandatory that leaders in the church take some kind of training, right? So they take on these counseling kind of roles, but have no, knowledge of like legit mental illness compared to just like mentoring, right? Yeah. Like, because I would go for that, and then I would get like, memorize the verses, or maybe, or the worst one was like, maybe there's generational sin. I'm like I can barely get out of bed, and you're telling me like that I'm going to pray about, grandma's grandma, that it's her fault. Like that. And I think it's like societies, and I get it. I feel like that too. It's like we want to explain it away. We want to reason. We want to, yeah.
It's very difficult to sit in the complexity of it. Yeah. And even to see a different way, because I definitely had people being like, well, you need to just pray and pray for him. And even some people who actually are counselors were not necessarily saying like you should go immediately.
Yeah.
So it is a very complex thing. And I do have grace for it, but it
Mm-hmm.
made me chill out on church a little bit. I haven't went back, and not because I'm like mad at God or anything like that.
Yeah.
It just, if something else happened there, which I don't want to go into publicly, but something else happened that just made me think I don't feel necessarily safe right now, and I just want to chill out a little bit.
Yeah. And who says we have to hang out with God just at church, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm just taking a little break from it. And I'm not even necessarily hurt or angry or mad at those people. I just, because a lot of people flubbed up handling this situation.
Yeah. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting to have to explain, like I just find it exhausting. I got a message recently about like, why do you keep talking about this? Like it's from a very evangelical person, and just be like, you're going to scare people away from God. And you should, you got to talk about the great things in your life. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like, I think people are more drawn to real people.
Yeah.
And so I found that, and then it like, I knew deep down, no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, that kind of thing. But a part of me is like, it started rethinking everything, like, oh my goodness, what, and I was just like, no, I'm drawn to real people. And I actually experience Jesus more with like a real, hurting person than I do with churchy McChurchy perfect, right? Because we know it's not true. We know this image, isn't.
All the churchy McPerfects, they all hang out together.
And then they don't know, yes.
Anyway, so it's like, so yeah, I would just rather be with the person who's actually slogging through real life stuff.
Mm-hmm. And honest about it, because then it gives me permission to be honest, right?
Yeah. That's why I'm really, really, really just working hard at being myself. Because I'm like, yeah, I really am this person who can be like this last week. I had such a hard week. And I just was like, well, I'm still going to. So yesterday I focused on, I'm still going to do my hair. I'm going to get myself together. I'm still going to focus on being cute, dressing cute, looking cute, because that's like a way that I actually show that that I'm still willing to get up and fight another day, even though that felt so extra. But this is who I am. I'm just really me, so that people know that can exist simultaneously.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of people lately, and I really appreciate their posting like the picture of them put together, and then like a hot mess, and being like, this is depression too. And I thought, yeah, well, obvious, but I think that's such a powerful image too. And I don't know about you, but I feel like even like if I go to therapy, or even like talking on here, I put myself together a little bit even more, because I figure, well, if I'm talking about quote unquote being like a little crazy, I feel like I should look, do you know what I mean? I feel like I need to look put together, because I'm already telling you I'm a hot mess. Maybe if I just, it's kind of like my armor a little bit. Do you know what I mean? My husband's like, why are you getting, like, you look awesome. Where are you going? I'm like, therapy.
I think I do that. I think I do that with makeup sometimes. It's just a little way to hide and feel just a little bit, not so much just like to look a certain way, but to feel a little bit hidden.
Yeah, it's like you have a little bit of a barrier. Yeah. It doesn't feel so, all your wounds are all out there. Yeah.
But yeah, it's not even a feeling self-conscious or anything like that. It's just about trying to hide a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. So, and that somehow feels a little, makes the world feel a tiny bit more safer. But honestly, there's a lot of days where I'm not going anywhere. I don't do anything, and I just look crazy. And
that's okay.
yeah, that's okay too. Yeah. But there's some days I'm too depressed to do anything.
Yeah. 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 And it's really hard. I find, how do you find in the church, like talking about suicidal ideation or things like that? I know if I've ever talked about it or when I share about it, you know, any stories online that people just, I've had a lot of people in different communities like just freak out. Like, how can you, they don't even want to talk about it because then it's like, I must not have a faith that I would even ever think of that, you know, I have a hard time explaining that it isn't a faith thing, right? Like it isn't that you have faith. It's just when you're in that much pain, it's not like you're thinking, you know, you just want the pain to end. You don't actually want to end things permanently, but you don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't talked too much about it in church with anyone. I've only written about it.
Yeah.
Occasionally people respond to me about what I've written, but I've never had anyone, thankfully, I've never had anyone challenge me like, oh, are you really a Christian because you're thinking about this? I've really only had supportive people, so that's been kind of nice.
Yeah, yeah. Have you had people respond online when you've posted about it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Anytime I've posted about mental illness stuff, people usually respond.
Yeah.
It really is a place where people feel like they are not seen and heard and free to talk about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty common. But a few times people have said, you know, or they'll say something like, please don't kill yourself, you know, hang in there. Because sometimes when I'm writing from the bitter edge, you know.
Right.
And there were a few times in these last couple of years that I was definitely like at a bitter edge kind of moment. So it was more kind of like not talking about it, like the subject of it, me just being like, I don't know, you guys, I don't know. So yeah, it was a lot of reach outs with like, you're valuable and you're loved and you're not alone. You don't have to face this alone.
Yeah. I'm finding, you know, everybody talks about how, you know, social media and the internet and all the, you know, bad, but I found like the most beautiful community online.
I think they're doing it wrong, honestly. Because I do too. I have a lot of really amazing friends. The people I follow or the people on my feed are really inspiring and really. I think it's because I follow a lot of writers. I don't know about you, but when you follow a lot of writers, I actually feel encouraged. And then on Instagram, the community that I've developed are people who respond to my content because of authenticity and vulnerability, or they just want like cute kid picture updates.
Yeah.
And they're just kind, nice people. And I've done a pretty good job at curating my spaces. So I do block and just remove people who are toxic and who are writing about toxic things. And you can find some really amazing communities. So.
Yeah. How do you find it when you talk about like social justice things? Do you get some people on your page, or do you find that a lot of social justice warriors follow? I'm totally into it now. Social justice warrior, talking about that word.
yeah, that's really funny. Anyway, that's been hijacked, but
yeah.
I honestly, like everything I posted about social justice, I used to have more people pushing back. There are a lot of them were people like I grew up with. I went to a private Christian school.
Okay.
In Detroit. Some of those people had just never evolved out of like one way of thinking, one way of voting, that kind of thing. So a lot of them, when I would push back and they would respond really immaturely, if they weren't open to dialogue, I would just block them. Like, yeah. I have no loyalty or allegiance to you. So I have a few people, probably like 5. I have like 4,900 Facebook friends, okay? 4,970 or something like that.
Wow.
I have probably 5 people out of those 4,970 friends.
Yeah.
Who would consider themselves to be conservative Republicans who will disagree with my posts in a very loving, kind, thoughtful, generous way, and we have dialogue and we disagree about random things. But they're still safe people. I don't care if people disagree with me, but you
Yeah.
can't be disrespectful. You can't be a bully. You can't be toxic. You can't be posting things that are toxic about women, about Black women, about Black people, about, you can't be lauding Trump's narcissism and his lies and all that. And then I just block. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like I have allegiance to anybody except for my really, really good friends and family.
Good for you. That's good to have boundaries. I love that.
Yeah, especially in my private personal Facebook, like I don't feel bad about curating that space. So,
Yeah.
um at all. So yeah, so now I don't get a lot of pushback. Probably if I shared from my public Facebook page, I used to share a lot more to there, and I haven't done as much just because it's an extra job.
Yeah.
I did get some more pushback there because that's public to everyone, and anyone in the world can comment on those posts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I really don't have the energy to engage. I mean, partly because of what's happening with me personally. I used to, like 8 years ago, but there was less place for all that fighting. It was on blog comments. Remember when people used to argue in blog comments?
Yeah.
Um, and so I used to go at it with people in blog comments, but now, like for the last 4 years, like I just haven't had the bandwidth, which is good because now I'm realizing now I do have a little tiny bit more bandwidth, but I'm like, well, no, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not my responsibility to teach you.
This is true. Yeah.
Be a human.
Yeah.
It's my responsibility to teach you to be human. It's okay if we disagree, but what you're not going to do is come up in here and be an asshole to me.
Totally. Yeah. That's not okay. Yeah. We were talking earlier, and I'm curious, I was talking to you about how, I'm realizing, well, one, I have some extra privileges because from what I understand with the medical community, US versus Canada, we kind of have more access. But I was wondering about stigma in the Black community, or how you've experienced that, and if it's different, or I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, I think being careful not to speak for all Black Americans.
Yes.
Definitely know from various things that I've read and conversations with people in communities that we definitely, as Black Americans, have a greater stigma of mental illness problems being a weakness of our character, of our personality. And then there's also this caricature of the Black women we're supposed to be always strong, always in this position of everything's okay, we have to handle it, we can handle it, which definitely leads to, I don't know how much you know about statistics, but Black women lead in everything. We lead in certain types of cancer, we lead in having fibroids, we lead in cardiac arrest, heart attack, heart disease, everything.
Wow.
Our numbers are soaring, and part of that, I think, is definitely part of how we are internalizing so much racism, all of the issues of being a woman, and of course the tax and toll of dealing with either maybe being a single mother or multiple traumas and then not getting help for it. So yes, I think there's a huge stigma I would love to see come down. I'd love to see those stigmas come down, which is also another reason, honestly, why I try to talk about it, because I really want more Black women to know, and actually not just women, just Black people in general, like this is not a sign of weakness. Therapy is not a sign of weakness. Antidepressants are not a sign of weakness. I literally grew up thinking that antidepressants were for weak people.
Really?
Yeah, and I can't even tell you how I got that, but it was definitely from my time in the Black community.
Wow.
I had time in kind of both communities, but that lie came from there. That whole weakness thing, depression is weakness, and yeah.
Wow.
I definitely think there's some unique challenges for us, and then on top of that, there's less of us in the medical fields, in the therapy field. So
I never thought of that.
Yeah, so if you go to a few and you don't feel comfortable being with someone who doesn't understand your particular traumas that are around race,
yeah,
you might not go back.
Right. Because they don't understand your full experience.
Yeah, unless they're really, really, very well read and very cognizant of any bias that they might bring in. It might be a painful experience. And actually, I have had one counselor who continuously doubted my experiences with racism. And I was just like, why am I here? I don't want to talk to you if I have to try to prove to you that racism exists. Like, good grief.
Yeah, you're like, I'm here for help, and you're telling me, wow.
And you're like doubting my experience. It was just really weird. Because I was just like, I don't even get your motive. Like, why are you using my time that I'm paying you for to have me help you explain why that I feel personally like racism has happened to me? I just didn't even understand it. I was like, I can't. So I changed, but
Wow. Wow.
I've never had a Black therapist. So
Never.
several, some really good ones, but I've never had a Black therapist. So.
Wow. Wow. I never thought of that before. Yeah. Wow. Do you think, like, how accessible is mental, like, health help there? Like, I know we, even if you don't have benefits, like we have a care card, a universal care system, I mean, it lends to huge weights, like, yeah, like especially in the mental health field. And I find too, like I would always get dismissed as soon as I, looked like I was, even, then there was no follow-up, right? It's like you had to be so, like I had to go to Emerge to get help, and I wasn't really at an emergency state, but no one would take me seriously. Do you think, or how is it in the States? Is there a huge discrepancy, with poverty and disparity in getting help?
Yes, there is, because in the States, you really can't see someone who's quality unless you have benefits, unless you have medical
Wow.
benefits. Obamacare was trying to address that,
Yeah.
but Trump is trying to get rid of it. Yeah. So, and then there can be really huge copays. Honestly, even when you have benefits, there were times I was still paying $100 a session, which is a lot.
Yeah.
A lot to deal with. Even for like the average middle class family, an extra $200 a month just for counseling is really expensive. So yeah, a lot of the people who I've ever talked to who are like, oh yeah, I'd love to go, but I don't have benefits. They've just got to try to find a counselor who's willing to either let them pay a very, very small amount, $20 or $30 an hour.
Yeah.
Or they basically just don't go. I mean, and now I'm wondering how things will change with e-counseling.
Yeah.
Help, and I know there's some other ones out there now where you can text and type and all that. And I think some of those are like 100 and something a month. I was actually going to look into one, honestly. I was looking into BetterHelp just last week, just because it would be more convenient,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, wouldn't that be amazing? It would, if more people, and then maybe because there'd be more people coming forward, because it would be like not person to person. Because I know it's pretty intimidating when you first, go to therapy, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind giving it a shot. I actually like being person to person better, but
Yeah.
as we mentioned before, I'm working full time and having 3 kids, and now being a single mom and shuffling
Right.
custodial times and all that. It's hard to find a time to block out to like go to counseling,
Yeah.
sit an hour, come back, because all in all that's going to be 2 hours, and then it's going to add an extra 80 to anywhere from 80 to $200 a month to my budget, which is really obnoxious. So
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't been for a while.
Yeah.
I haven't been for a while, but I have gone. I have a pattern of going since college. I've been to several counselors for several years,
Yeah.
trying to wade through stress and trauma and everything that happened in my childhood and situation. My mom being ill, and
Yeah. Wow. And it sounds like, even if you're not going to therapy right now, like you're doing the work. You're
yeah.
doing
I
the work.
decided at some point I have to do the work myself because I can't wait.
Yeah.
I knew at some point, like, I won't survive this if I don't do all of this stuff myself. So I have that DBT book that I work through. I
Yeah.
have a bunch of books on my Kindle that I work through periodically. And I try to stay pretty educated on managing my CPTSD.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And we will put in the post when this goes live all of your handles, because I really think everyone needs to follow you, and her spaces are safe and vulnerable and beautiful. And I just want you all to follow her and experience, you know, what I've experienced just from, I haven't engaged a lot, but just from reading and hearing from you. And your book, I got it on it. You can get it on Amazon, but it goes to your Kindle, correct?
Yes, and I'm still working on getting the hard copy together.
Yeah.
Just call Kindle call Amazon Publishing and have them push it through, because there's just one little issue with it. But hopefully the book, like if someone wants a hard copy, will be available in the next week is my hope.
Oh, wow, wonderful. Yeah, I got it on my Kindle. So it is called Grace Actually, Faith, Love, Lost, and Black Womanhood. Yes. And we'll put a Amazon link in here as well. And it's, yeah, I was telling Grace that I read it in one sitting. I couldn't not. It was,
oh, that's really sweet.
Yeah, it was powerful.
I just didn't want it to end. I love it.
So powerful. I just, yeah, and just, you know, sometimes people, like they do, you know, with race and class and stuff, they kind of lump us together as you know, and every experience, I've learned so much from you, which hopefully will help me, you know, make space for people with different experiences than my own. So just thank you so much for being brave online and coming here and just talking to me, because you didn't know me, even though I felt like you were my friend.
Well, you know what? I've met a bunch of She Loves people at like the Festival of Faith and Writing and different things, and I love Miss McVicker.
Yes.
So,
yes. Yeah. I know. I'm pretty sure that Edilette was the one that was like, you need to follow her. And I was like, done.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. And yes, I'll put all the information below. And it was so, so wonderful to meet you.
You too. Thank you for a great interview.